So many people approach relationships as if they're a game to be won, a role to be performed, or a never ending test to pass. It's almost as if someone somewhere created this unspoken rule that it is someone else's responsibility to keep a woman happy. That happiness is something that has to be maintained, like a delicate balancing act, constantly adjusted, constantly measured. But the truth is, happiness isn't something that can be handed to us, wrapped in a perfect bow. It's not a prize that someone wins on our behalf. It's not a gift that someone else can give and expect to last. Happiness is an inside job. The problem with this idea that a woman's happiness is someone else's responsibility is that it creates an illusion. It makes happiness seem like something external, something that depends on how well someone else shows up, how much effort they put in, how grand their gestures are. And while effort, love, and care matter, they are not the foundation of happiness. Because if happiness is built on what someone else does or doesn't do, it's fragile. It means that the moment they slip, the moment they fail, everything shatters. And that's not happiness, that's dependency. We have to stop treating relationships like a performance where one person is always on stage, trying to entertain, trying to keep the other person smiling, trying to keep up this endless dance of, are you happy? Did I do enough? Did I say the right thing? Did I make you feel good? Because when love becomes a performance, it stops being real. Love is meant to be a space where two people meet fully, authentically, without the pressure of constantly proving their worth. When we buy into the idea that happiness comes from the outside, we set ourselves up for disappointment. We look for validation in things that are fleeting. A romantic dinner might make us feel good for a moment. A sweet message might brighten our day. A grand gesture might feel like magic. But what happens when those things fade? What happens when life settles into the quiet moments? When love isn't wrapped in surprises and fireworks? That's when the truth becomes clear. If happiness was never ours to begin with, if it always depended on someone else, then it was never real. Real happiness isn't found in what someone does for us. It's found in who we are when no one is watching, in how we feel about ourselves when everything is still. It's in the way we choose to heal, the way we face our own wounds, the way we decide that joy isn't something we wait for, it's something we create. And that kind of happiness, that kind of self-assurance, that's what makes love powerful. Because when we are already whole, love becomes a choice, not a need. It becomes a beautiful addition to an already fulfilling life rather than the thing we rely on to feel complete. The most dangerous thing we can do to ourselves and to our relationships is to place the weight of our happiness onto someone else's shoulders. It is not fair to them and it is not fair to us. Because when we expect someone else to be the source of our joy, we also give them the power to take it away. And that's not love. Love should be freedom. Love should be two whole people coming together, not two incomplete souls looking for someone else to fill in the gaps. So we have to stop the game, stop the constant measuring, stop the idea that someone else is responsible for our emotional world. We need to own our happiness, to take it back, to stop handing it over to people like it's something they have to guard, like it's something that will break if they don't handle it just right. Because the truth is, real happiness, it doesn't need to be kept. It needs to be lived. And that is where everything changes. There's something exhausting about the way we've been taught to approach relationships. It's as if there's this unspoken rule that one person, usually the man, is expected to take on the role of making sure the woman is happy at all times. Like it's some sort of full-time job, a never-ending performance where his success is measured by how well he keeps her satisfied, entertained, or emotionally fulfilled. It sounds romantic at first. It sounds like love. But the reality, it's a trap for both people. The moment we believe that it's one person's job to keep the other happy, we stop seeing relationships as partnerships and start seeing them as performances. And performances are exhausting. They're filled with pressure, expectation, and this constant fear that if you don't get it just right, if you don't say the right thing, if you don't anticipate every need, if you don't show up in exactly the way they expect, then you failed. But love was never supposed to be something you succeed or fail at. It was never supposed to be a test, never meant to feel like walking on eggshells, constantly wondering, did I do enough? Did I make her happy? Am I measuring up? When we treat happiness like something one person must maintain for the other, we take something beautiful, love, connection, partnership, and turn it into pressure. We turn it into obligation. And nothing suffocates love faster than obligation. Because suddenly the relationship is no longer about two people choosing each other, showing up for each other, growing together. It becomes about maintaining an illusion, and illusions don't last. But the truth is, no matter how much someone loves you, no matter how much they try, they cannot be the sole source of your happiness. They cannot carry the weight of your emotional world on their shoulders every single day. And when we expect them to, we set them up for failure. Because no one, not even the most devoted, most loving, most well intentioned partner, can meet every need, anticipate every emotion, or protect us from every hurt. And when they inevitably fall short, what happens? Resentment, disappointment, frustration, because we made them responsible for something they were never meant to carry. And the irony, the more someone feels pressure to keep their partner happy, the less happy they actually feel themselves. They start to lose pieces of who they are, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to fit into this role of the perfect partner. And in the process, they stop being fully present, stop being their true selves, because when you are constantly trying to please someone, you stop being honest. You stop sharing your real thoughts, your real struggles, your real emotions, because you're too busy making sure you don't disrupt their happiness. But real love isn't about pleasing. Real love isn't about performance. It's about presence. It's about truth. It's about being able to sit across from someone in the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of who you both are and still choose each other without pressure, without obligation, without this exhausting need to constantly prove something. If love has become a job, if happiness has become a task, then something is broken. And the only way to fix it is to step back and ask the hard questions. Am I expecting someone else to be responsible for my emotional world? Have I placed my happiness in someone else's hands? Have I made this relationship about maintaining a feeling rather than building something real? Because the truth is, happiness isn't something we can demand. It's something we bring. The healthiest, strongest relationships are the ones where both people come in already full, not perfect, not without struggles, but full of their own self-awareness, their own purpose, their own ability to cultivate joy within themselves. And when two people like that come together, that's when relationships thrive. That's when love feels like freedom instead of pressure. That's when happiness is no longer a weight to carry, but a natural result of two whole people choosing to walk this path together. Because love was never meant to be exhausting. Happiness was never meant to be someone else's job. And the moment we let go of that expectation, the moment we stop playing the game of constantly keeping score on who's happy and who's responsible for it, that's when love finally has the space to be real. We don't even realize how much of what we believe about love, happiness, and relationships isn't really ours. It's been given to us, shaped by the movies we watched growing up, the stories we were told, the music we listened to, the way love was portrayed over and over again in books, in television, in fairy tales. And so, without even realizing it, we start living by a script we didn't write. A script that tells us what love should look like, how relationships should feel, and what our roles should be in them. And for women, that script has been especially clear. You deserve to be cherished, adored, made to feel like a queen. Your partner should be the one keeping you happy, making grand gestures, fixing every problem, protecting your peace. And for men, the message has been equally strong. If she's not happy, you failed. Your love should be enough. Your efforts should always be more. You should always be doing something to keep her smiling, to keep her satisfied, to keep her from ever feeling disappointment, boredom, or sadness. But real life doesn't work like that. Real relationships don't look like the ones in movies. In reality, happiness isn't a constant. It isn't something that one person can provide for another like a perfectly wrapped gift. It comes and goes, it fluctuates. And sometimes love exists in the spaces where happiness isn't even present, where you are simply there for each other, holding space for pain, for struggle, for growth. The problem with the way love is portrayed in culture is that it sets us up for failure. It makes us believe that if we're not constantly happy, constantly in love with every moment, constantly being swept off our feet, then something is wrong. And that belief is dangerous because it makes people question perfectly good relationships. It makes people walk away from something real. because it doesn't match an unrealistic ideal. And worst of all, it places pressure where pressure should never exist. It turns love into something that must be constantly proven rather than something that is simply lived. When we watch love stories, we see the highlights, the big moments, the declarations, the passion, the dramatic gestures. What we don't see are the quiet moments, the in between spaces, the parts where love is tested, not by grand acts, but by patience, by understanding, by simply choosing each other, even on the days that don't feel like a movie. And yet, because of the way love has been sold to us, we chase those highs, we expect them. And when they don't come, we start thinking something is missing. We start placing blame. And too often that blame lands on our partners. Why aren't you making me happy? Why doesn't this feel the way it should? Why aren't you doing enough? But love was never supposed to be a constant performance of happiness. It was never meant to be measured by how much effort one person puts in to keep the other entertained, fulfilled, or endlessly pleased. Real love is deeper than that. It's not about chasing a feeling, it's about choosing a person. It's about understanding that happiness isn't a service that someone else provides, it's a state of being that we cultivate within ourselves. And yet, the way relationships are often portrayed teaches people to expect something that isn't sustainable. It teaches women to wait for a love that keeps them on a pedestal rather than one that meets them eye to eye. It teaches men to measure their worth by how well they meet an impossible standard. And in the end, it leaves both feeling exhausted, disappointed, and disconnected. We have to stop letting these narratives define the way we love. We have to stop believing that a relationship success is based on how well someone keeps us happy. Instead, we need to redefine what happiness in love actually means. It's not about constant excitement. It's not about a partner who is always trying to prove something. It's about two people who are whole on their own, who come together not because they need each other for happiness, but because they choose each other in every version of life, the joyful, the challenging, the mundane. Because real love isn't found in a grand gesture. It's found in the quiet moments, in the small, simple ways we show up, in the understanding that happiness was never someone else's responsibility to give us, it was always ours to create. And once we embrace that, once we stop chasing the illusion and start building something real, that's when love finally becomes what it was meant to be. The hardest thing to accept when we talk about relationships and emotional connections is the simple truth that no one can give you what you don't already have. We often search for love, for fulfillment, for validation from the people around us, thinking that someone else's presence, someone else's attention is what will make us whole. But the reality is, the journey to healing, growth, and emotional fulfillment begins within us. It starts with how we choose to show up for ourselves. We can't expect someone else to fix our broken pieces, to fill the gaps in our heart that we haven't learned to heal on our own. And yet, so many of us enter relationships with this expectation that our partner will make us feel complete. We look to them to be the answer to all the things we haven't yet resolved in ourselves. But what happens when that doesn't work? What happens when, despite their best efforts, we still feel lost, disconnected, or unsatisfied? The truth is, if we don't first know how to be at peace with ourselves, if we don't take the time to heal from our past wounds, to discover who we truly are outside of our relationships, then nothing external will ever be enough. No matter how much love, affection, or attention we receive from others, it will never fill that void. It will never satisfy the need for self-acceptance, self-love, and emotional balance that can only come from within. That's why if we want our relationships to thrive, if we want to build real, authentic emotional connections, we have to focus on ourselves first. We have to make the choice to heal, to grow, to embrace our own journey of self-discovery. Only when we do that can we show up fully in any relationship. Only then can we bring our whole selves to the table, free from the expectations that someone else must complete us. We hear a lot about the idea of soulmates, the belief that there's someone out there who is our perfect match, who will fulfill us in every way. And while the idea of a soulmate is beautiful, it can also be limiting. It suggests that we are incomplete until we find this one person who somehow fixes everything. But that's not the reality of true emotional connection. True connection comes when two people meet not as half of something, but as two whole individuals who have already done the work of healing and self-awareness. When you've taken the time to nurture your own emotional well-being, when you've learned to be at peace with yourself, that's when you're able to give and receive love in its purest form. That's when you're able to offer your partner something real and whole, not something that is dependent on them making you feel better or complete. You bring your own happiness, your own joy, your own sense of fulfillment. And in doing so, you create a partnership based on mutual respect, mutual growth, and mutual care, rather than on the need to save each other. And here's the beautiful thing. The more we focus on our own healing, the more we discover about ourselves, the more we learn to embrace our strengths and our flaws, the more we begin to attract the kind of people who align with that energy. When we are whole within ourselves, we naturally attract relationships that honor that wholeness. We stop settling for unhealthy dynamics, for relationships that demand us to be something we're not, or to depend on someone else to make us happy. Instead, we find people who truly see us, who truly value us for who we are, not for the role we play in their lives. But here's the thing that's often hardest to accept. Growth is a process. Self-discovery is not something that happens overnight. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment. It's a journey, a long, messy, beautiful journey of peeling back layers, of facing fears, of confronting our past and learning to forgive ourselves. And as much as we may want instant change, true transformation takes time. But it's in that process that we discover our power. It's in the moments when we show up for ourselves, when we choose to take care of our emotional needs, when we prioritize our own growth, that we start to see the shifts. We begin to trust ourselves more. We begin to understand what we truly need, what we truly want, what makes us feel alive and whole. And that understanding allows us to build healthier, more fulfilling connections with others, because we no longer rely on them to give us something we should already be giving ourselves. When we stop depending on someone else to complete us, when we stop expecting someone else to be the source of our happiness, we create the space for love to flourish. Because love, real love, isn't about neediness. It isn't about clinging to someone for validation. It's about two people choosing to show up, choosing to share their journeys, choosing to grow together while still maintaining their independence and individuality.